Welcome to the WIPS podcast, inspiring and empowering women to take the stage and up their game in the public speaking arena. My name is Chantal Bossé from Shabas, Leaders for Your Presentation, Public Speaking, and AV Needs. Enjoy the show. Hello, everyone. My guest today is Keisha Rivers. She's from Charlotte in North Carolina. Welcome, Keisha.
Thank you for having me.
I'm pleased to have you around, and I'm pleased to be able to discuss with you about public speaking for women. And let's just start with, what is your work or business? What do you do?
Well, I am officially a chief outcome facilitator.
Wow, that's an interesting title.
Which is actually interesting because I was known as a consultant for a number of years. I was known as a strategist for a number of years. There are a lot of people that called me a coach, which I am not a coach. But chief outcome facilitator fits because my goal is working with clients to get them to what their outcome is. And
that's very nice.
Right. And I prefer the process of facilitating that as opposed to bossing them around or doing it for them.
Which is a good thing. And another question for you, even though I have my own opinion, but I need to ask you, would you consider yourself a shy or outspoken person?
I'm a little of both.
Nice. Okay.
And it's interesting because when I am in an environment that I am passionate about, or I'm speaking to a group, or I'm leading a session or facilitating, then I'm very outspoken. But I am the type of person that when I come into new situations, I tend to observe first. So I can be rather shy. But if I'm on one of my soapbox issues, as I call it, or if I'm in work mode, then there is no passive to my aggressive at all. It's just right there.
Well, and what resonates with me is, like you mentioned, when you're in your passion zone, let's call it this way, that's when you just kind of develop and you forget about being a little bit shy.
Oh, yeah.
And I really like that because I think people will probably relate to that. Many people can relate to that. And I'm glad that you mentioned it. And when was the first time that you were asked to speak in public?
It's actually interesting because I remember second grade. When there was this gifted and talented class that they were pulling me out of my regular class to go and take part in. And we used to do all of these independent study projects, which was my first time doing that kind of thing. And there was this thing with my school where they would have a student read the lunch menus for the week. You give the weather report and you do the lunch menus. This was a big deal back then, and I'm dating myself considerably by mentioning that. But that was my first time, and it was awesome because I guess I didn't realize that I was on a live news broadcast with my very first public speaking.
But that's interesting. Second grade and live news broadcast.
Yes. So it was a live news broadcast, and I thought it was fascinating because that was the first time I heard about I saw the green screen and all of that kind of stuff in action. So they had me sit at the desk with the weather guy, and he's like, hey, we have Keisha from, now it's my elementary school, and she's going to tell us about the weather and what you can expect for lunch this week. And so I was talking to him, and I'm on this live news broadcast the whole city.
And how was it? How was that first experience? Even though, like you say, it's second grade, but it still is your first time.
It was actually awesome because I just looked at it as having a conversation with him, and I didn't focus on the audience. And even now, if I have to do a TV segment or, any type of interview, I am completely nonplussed. I'm not nervous at all. It doesn't bother me because I was like, I was 7 years old and I was on TV. It's not a big deal. So, it was great because my first introduction to speaking in public was more along the lines of having a conversation with someone. So now whenever I'm doing any type of speaking, I just look at it as I'm having a conversation with a person. So whether it's 5 people, one person or 5 people, or 350 or 1,000 or whatever it is. I just approach it as I'm having a conversation.
That is such an important takeaway. Just remembering we're having a conversation, whoever the group is, how big it is. I love it. And I'm wondering, since you start so early in your life, did you have any, well, would we say bad experience or not so pleasant experiences when you were in front of a group?
So the only times that I didn't have not so good experiences was when I ended up being in my head, as I call it, more so than being in the moment.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is if you're having a conversation and you're making it about you interacting with the people that you're, in the room with, that's one thing. But if we get into that part where we're in our heads and we're so busy thinking about what we're saying and how we're coming across and what we look like and should we have worn those shoes and is my dress too short and oh my gosh, wow, they're not responding to me and they're not laughing and they're not saying anything and are they getting this? And then you freeze because you're having this internal dialogue and you're so busy talking to yourself that you stop talking to the people in front of you.
And I guess that's probably what you learn the few times that you, like you say, you weren't present in the moment and you started overthinking about you. I call it the me factor. We're focusing on ourselves. Any other things you think people should learn about not so pleasant experiences that they would have during their lives?
Well, I think mainly, and this was something that I made a shift, and it was a buddy of mine, and he said that a lot of times when things happen that are not so pleasant, people ask, why me?
That's true.
And one of the things that I really started doing is, because I've had my share of not so pleasant things that have happened to me in my life, I look at it as, what am I learning from this? And what can I take away from this? So instead of looking at it as a situation where it could potentially cripple me and I'm like, okay, you know what? That was horrible. I am never doing that again. Instead, I look at it and say, you know what is it that I could learn from this? How could I be better? What was it that I wasn't prepared for? Or, what is it that it's causing me to get out of my comfort zone with? Because a lot of times when we get really good at something, we get comfortable, and anything that comes that shoves us out of that comfort zone a little bit, we're kind of, scratching and clawing to get back in. Here's my circle. What are you doing? Get me out of here.
You're pushing me out of there. That's not comfortable.
Right. And it was interesting because I recently had an opportunity to do a video conference call with a group in Pakistan.
Oh, wow.
And I do not speak the language. I didn't even know what language they spoke. I was coming in and it was supposed to be like a 30-minute deal altogether.
Okay.
And I was coming in just to give maybe 3 to 5 short tips on this topic. That was it. And I'd never done it before. Didn't know what to expect. It was kind of, they contacted me on Wednesday and asked me if I could do it on Saturday morning. And
that was kind of quick turnaround.
Right. And so when, and they said, oh yeah, they'll call you via, video chat on Facebook. And I'm like, okay, so I'm, connecting with the person. And so they message me and say, okay, it's 6:30 in the morning here, which is not my that's not my good zone. And so, I get on the call and he turns the phone around and he has everybody wave to me and introduces me. And then he turns the phone back around because he's the interpreter. And for the rest of the time, I'm talking to him. Oh. But I'm having to talk in a way where I'll say a sentence and then I have to wait for him to translate it.
So probably gives you time to think, but could open
the door
to
overthink. That's a bad thing. Because normally, all of the things that they tell you about speaking where you want to, have eye contact with your audience and you want to, exude energy so that, even if it's a situation where you don't have the language in common, people can gauge from my facial expressions and my mannerisms and, the tone of my voice and everything else, they can get a lot of meaning from me. But I wasn't able to do any of that because all I could see was him. And he's like just monotone, like right there, just say it. And I'm just like, okay.
He's stripping out the old you thing because of the
So, and then
Oh
afterwards,
boy.
he turns the video, the phone back around, and everybody's waving like, "Thank you." And I was just like, "Thank you for what? Did you get anything out of that? Was that good? Was it?" So yeah, that was definitely outside of my comfort zone. And afterwards, my very first reaction was, "I don't want to do this anymore."
I
And then,
guess so.
but then I got back and I said, "Okay, what can you learn from this? What is it about this experience that makes you say you don't want to do it anymore? How can this be better?" So I always try to turn those not so pleasant experiences into a learning opportunity.
Of course,
Of,
that makes
how,
sense.
right. How can this be better? And so then I got on the phone with the organizers yesterday. And I was like, "Okay, so I have questions and this is how I think we can make it better. So when can I do it again?"
Nice.
Yeah.
And of course, asking them to even listen to your tips on how you could make it better, that will make your life easier in the
Yes.
future.
Definitely.
Nice. And I think it's a very nice learning point for everyone listening to us right now, because it will happen. If you speak in public, sometimes it will go smoothly, and some other times, well, we'll have to deal with it.
Yeah, exactly.
And for when you have some great experiences, do you have a particularly good, or what's your greatest memory that you can share with us?
I have had, I've had several ones. I think the greatest one that resonates with me is when I was called in to do a training presentation for, well, actually there are two. There was one where I was called in to do a presentation about the art, science, and psychology of communication.
Wow, that's interesting.
Style and substance. That was the title of my talk. And I was doing it at a conference of IT professionals, designers, creatives, people that they work by themselves or in their little silos, and they're not the type where they come in and they want to hear this, they don't sit there and listen to talks. They go on and watch videos, and
I totally get it.
So I got into, and my session originally was supposed to be a small group session of about maybe 20 to 30 people that I could facilitate. And when I got there that morning, the organizers told me, "Yeah, you're going to be in this ballroom," and da-da-da-da. And I'm just like, "Wait, ballroom? Wait, that's not a 20. Okay, so you got this big space for us." And they're like, no. We're going to have you go in there because we had so many more people sign up for your session because of the title. And I said, "Oh, okay, so how many more do you have?" And they said, "Well, the whole conference." And
wow.
Right. And I was like, okay, so that's like a couple thousand people. Yeah. Okay.
Oh, that's a totally different mindset.
Yes. Because what I had planned to do based on a 20 to 30 person intimate type of thing is vastly different from what I was going to have to do with a huge audit, a huge setting.
Oh, yeah.
And on top of that, I ended up going behind the keynote speaker for that morning, who just happened to be someone that worked in the White House, and he had like these long accolades, and you're standing outside the door and you can hear the applause and all of this stuff with him, and I'm just like, seriously, you're gonna make me do that?
I need to follow up that person.
Right.
No way.
Right. So I sucked it up and went in, and I decided that I wasn't going to change my presentation. I wasn't going to change what I was going to ask them to do. Instead of them doing it in pairs, they were now going to do it with the people at their table. And I got rave reviews because they're like, "Oh my gosh, this is the first major talk that we've had where we're actually talking to people at our tables and we're interacting, and and we're sharing our stories." So it was great because, and what I took away from that was, don't change who you are and what you're planning just because the circumstances change. Because I could have gone into, "Oh, this has to be a keynote, and therefore I'm not going to have them engage. I'm not going to have them talk to each other." And that wasn't the point of the presentation. The presentation was all about the art, science, and psychology of communication. It's style and substance. So they had to interact. They had to try it out.
And you
it
totally nailed it because you
Yep.
stayed on your official plan. You
Yes.
had planned for it. You probably had practiced a lot for it anyway. So it was the safest route and it paid off big times.
Yes.
Congrats. That's great.
you.
I love your memory. And I'm sure it's going to inspire some more women to think about it, that if you stay yourself, you will succeed.
Yes.
And talking about staying yourselves, do you have one wardrobe tip that you would like to share with women taking the stage?
I would say the biggest tip is to, and you just alluded to it, just remain true to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Don't get up there and try to be Oprah or Ellen or Marie Folio or, Cheryl Steinberg. Don't try to be anybody else. Be you. And there are so many women that I come across who are like, oh, I want to be like Lisa Nichols, or I want to be like this person. And I've actually had a couple of people that have come up to me and say, okay, teach me how to be just like you. And I said, you can't be just like me. You have to be like you. And
that's it. And being like us also means just making sure we're dressing up the way we feel comfortable, because I'm quite sure that yourself, you're probably making sure you're not dressing up as somebody else so you don't feel comfortable.
Right. And the great thing is that you never know what opportunities are going to come out as a result. And I always tell people, most people don't think, well, I don't need to practice being me. Well, you kind of do if you're not used to doing, interviews or being on television or being in front of a group of, 500 people. You need to become centered, as I call it. And so, staying true to yourself and being yourself is one, but also finding those ways of kind of recentering and getting back to who you are when you find yourself getting pulled out. Because, going up after this keynote, dude, I could have gotten really pulled out of myself and start.
Oh, I can believe you.
I go, you know what? I'm not doing it anymore. I changed my mind. I feel laryngitis.
I don't want to go anymore. And that is such an important tip. And I'm usually wrapping up asking what would be your one tip to empower women to take the stage confidently. You already shared one, but would you mind sharing another one? I'm sure that you must have something else you would like to share.
The other thing that I do, I always have a, as I call it, a pre-talk routine.
Oh, I like that.
And the pre-talk routine is my way of getting my, how they show the sports teams and they're getting in the zone, so to speak. I have certain music that I listen to, and I have 3 things that I always tell myself before I go on. And so that's my routine. So I listen to this music that I have that like pumps me up and makes me feel invincible. And then I tell myself, you are awesome at what you do. You belong on this stage and you're going to own it.
I love that.
And that's my routine. And before I go out, I close my eyes, I do that. I say my prayer, I open my door and I'm like, hey, I'm out. Let's go. Let's do this. And
ready to rock and roll.
Exactly.
That is marvelous, because I'm sure people can learn a lot about your experience and everything you just shared with us. And I want to thank you so much for taking the time to be with us on the WIPS podcast.
Oh, thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. And I hope we'll get to meet again, and we'll keep following you. We'll ask people to look at your information. So thank you very much, Keisha Rivers.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed the show. Please tell us what you think by commenting, and even share with your own networks to inspire and empower others to do public speaking.